Hello and welcome to the App Management Experts podcast, where we discuss the latest news, developments, and ideas within the application management space. Often inviting industry experts to join the discussion, this podcast is for digital workplace managers, application managers, IT professionals, or anyone with a focus on applications in the enterprise. I'm your host, Bob Kelly, and in my career, I've amassed decades of experience in application and desktop management and have spoken to over 100 enterprise customers about their related challenges. I'll lean on that experience in these sessions to foster an interesting discussion. Thanks for joining, and now on to today's episode. Hey, Crispin, thanks for joining me. Crispin and I go way back. His TLUX service does some great things helping people with application implementations and admin studio training, repackaging type world. So thanks for joining me, Crispin.
Hey, no problem at all. It's exciting times for everyone in this space, right? With a lot going on, a lot of new challenges, a lot of assumptions being challenged, and a lot of fun things to talk about.
Yeah, it was going to be MSIX forever, and then it just never ended up happening. And now it seems like maybe we're going to start to get there, at least for some people.
Yeah, I think that there's always the kind of organisations that want to dip their toe in the water first, right? See how warm the pool is,
Mm-hmm.
and some won't go anywhere near the pool, and others will go swimming head first. And I think MSIX, right, it's been 6 years, is it? Maybe even more now. It's felt
Yeah,
like an
yeah,
overladen jumbo jet trying to take off, right? And every time it tries, they put a bit more power on, they change the flaps, and it's kind of getting there. But for the clients we talk to, just on that topic, right? The question's always been why.
mm-hmm.
Why do we need to even bother? Because it seems like a lot of work.
Yeah.
Be
Yeah,
it,
I heard a lot of people liking the story they heard, but maybe not enough to make that move a priority, especially
right?
when they're hearing compatibility isn't great.
Yeah,
So it
yeah,
was almost an excuse, right? Like I saw the MSIX report card, and it says that it's not ready yet. So good. They've got 1,000 other things to worry about.
yeah,
And
yeah, exactly.
now that message is changing. The compatibility's pretty good, and the app
Mm,
attach story is interesting to more and more people. And
yeah,
you know the there are a lot of benefits around isolation, security, uninstall, updates. So there's value there, but still, I think you don't find a whole lot of enterprises that are like, okay, now's the time.
yeah. I think they've. I mean, all those are really good kind of nuggets of pull factors. And I think if a company's got two or three of those compelling events, let's call them, then they're
Hmm.
definitely going to be in that conversation. What I've seen is that is the case. Maybe it's updates, right? People are spending a lot of time on keeping apps updated, or they're not, and then they're firefighting when something happens. And we all know how expensive that is, right? And distracting.
Yeah.
Um, but they've now also got the whole, Win 10, Win 11 discussion. There's even companies now looking at Windows 12, right? What's that going to mean in the business?
Hmm.
Um, it's cyclic. It's this 4 or 5 year cycle, and peaks and troughs of what the platform does. I think with, as we're on MSIX, right? Because we miss of us not to talk about that a bit in that when it first came out, it was like, oh, you've got to sign everything, and it's this big innovative, you know, it's MSIX. I mean, what's not to love about something that's better than MSI? Because everyone loves MSI. It's transformed our lives for 25 years. But yeah, I think the reality hasn't met the kind of the PR, let's say. But I think it's changing. I think it's changing as everything does eventually.
Yeah. Slow enough anyway. So
Yeah.
the topic of the day, or yeah, I'll call it the topic of the day because we'll talk about it, and I feel like I've been talking about it a lot lately. Is application owners. We've just heard forever that everybody has some concept of an application owner. They might call them a business owner or
Have a
technical
different
owner,
name
or
somewhere, and
What other names have you heard that are kind of synonymous?
I've literally heard, everything from software expert, right, to the classic application owner to application administrator.
Hmm.
I mean, what the heck does that mean, right?
Yeah.
They're all very vague, and it's an age-old problem that we know. Um, and the problem is, frankly, responsibility, right? And whenever there's a responsibility question, everyone seems to disappear. So, oh no, I
Yeah.
don't possibly know enough. George is a lot more knowledgeable than me. Get George to do it, or I haven't got time, and and I think the problem is that people don't really understand what that definition means. So, I think if
Right.
you and I spoke about application owner because of our pedigree and heritage and experience, we'd probably straight on what we mean by that. But what a healthcare company might mean by it will be different to a university, will be different to a government agency, And so I think before you even try and demystify and unravel that, it's kind of, well, what do we mean by that? I think that's where we see the conversations going. And it's trying to demystify it. It's trying to attach some actions to it. So actually, you know, and again, the word owner is like, oh, owning, you own things that are expensive, and houses, own a house is expensive, right? You
Yeah.
own a car
You're
is
calling
expensive.
me responsible, and I don't want
Jeez,
more
yeah, I mean,
responsibility.
oh, crikey, I'm not sure I'm growing up enough for this, right? um, and then people are naturally, going to go, well, yeah, I kind of could help, but I might help some other time. So I think, yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's a problem actually because without application owners within the business, then actually a lot of things will fail. Right. I
Right.
think
Yeah. If they're the person you're going to go to and you don't know who that person is,
yeah, what happened?
you're starting off on the wrong foot with any kind of application question you might have. What
Yeah,
kind of typical responsibilities do you see enterprises assigning to application owners?
it's everything from you are responsible for having the latest and greatest version and knowing all about the licensing and knowing where it's stored and where I can get access to it. So the kind of practical things
Hmm.
to knowing about any nuances, right? Some applications are a pain to deploy. Some have got, a, a, a complicated CLI requirement, right? So command line syntax string that looks like Egyptian hieroglyphics, which people may have inherited from their predecessor or colleague of theirs who's, just given them this responsibility, all the way through to expectations that this person knows the ins and outs of the package, and they can be the one that people call when there's a problem with the software, let alone
Right.
deploying. It's kind of, we do for Microsoft when there's a problem with Excel, right? You know, um, and back in my days at working for Install Shield, it's a similar thing, right? This goes back 25 years. I'm showing my age, right? But we used to have people contact us as Install Shield software complaining about their installation, right, not working on their computer. I'm like, well, we're the guys who write the software that your software company uses. We can't help you with your NVIDIA driver setup, right? We're not NVIDIA. Um, so that's what we see sometimes, and we see it more in the public sector kind of organizations in the US, actually, kind of,
Mm.
and I don't know why that is, actually, before I think it's just because they have a slightly looser mantra in terms of ownership. Um,
Yeah, I think there's different levels. So when I first started digging into this topic and kind of trying to get my arms all the way around it, the first thing I realized is there's very little to no guidance whatsoever in terms of what does it mean. Everybody has an application owner program of some kind, but there's no prescribed definition.
no,
There's no guidance or best practices really to follow.
no.
So one of the first things I tried to do was come up with the levels of
Mm,
application owners that
mm,
might exist, and I
yeah,
came up with application monitor,
mm,
coordinator, administrator, and subject matter expert,
right.
and each of them requiring more and more time and effort. With the simplest one and the one that is easiest to bite off on and get value from is just application monitor. So I'm going to say,
Mm,
all right, Crispin, you're responsible for Notepad++.
yeah,
Every couple weeks, take a look, see if there's a new update, and suggest if we should update to it or not. That all by itself could potentially get you in front of a whole bunch of security vulnerabilities, or
Mm.
you're paying for maintenance on something that you never update because nobody's making the call. Like, should we
Yeah,
update?
exactly. Everyone's scared.
And,
It's my point earlier. Everyone's scared to commit to that.
mhm. And the flip side of that is to be, oh, well, we want to be evergreen. We're gonna keep everything up to date all the time. Well, that doesn't scale very well. If you if you're an enterprise with hundreds and thousands of applications, there's probably dozens of updates every day, and you can't, even with some strong automation, it would be a real challenge to actually pilot and roll out all of these updates with any kind of confidence. So
I was going to say, I
you
mean,
need a human filter.
yeah, completely. I mean, automation, is the name of the game these days, as we all know, right? The world of ops migration and user computing, application management. They're all the modern terms, what we used to call application packaging, right, or repackaging, which was the,
Hmm.
the classic too. And I don't think that, you know, I think you probably repackage 10% of an estate now, maybe 15. It's not the 80% it was 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah,
Vendor MSIs have got a lot better, right, from what we see. Deployment mechanisms have got more forgiving. Wrapping technologies, right?
right.
People
So when
talk
you
about,
say packaging, you mean repackaging, like
I mean, repackaging, yeah.
okay. So creating a
Yeah,
new custom installation out of a legacy
yeah,
setup, usually in MSI format.
yeah, exactly. And that used to be the world that everyone lived in, right? It was
Yeah.
repackage everything. And some people call it packaging as well, which is completely confusing.
Right. That's why I always try to say, okay,
Yeah,
let's say, because people will say scripting, packaging, repackaging, and then
right.
they'll use them synonymously, and they are like,
Very,
packaging can be an umbrella term, but
very different.
yeah,
And
repackaging is a very specific thing. That
yeah,
you're right. I either come across enterprises that they still repackage everything because that's how they do business,
mm,
or they repackage only when they absolutely need to, and
that's for sure.
hopefully that's only a few times you know
Yeah, yeah.
a year or a quarter.
We see less and less in our world. TLUX helps clients from cradle to grave, right, depending on their need, and we're technology agnostic, right? We work with all kinds, and we're in the engine room of these businesses, and I definitely see a lot less appetite to repackage than there was. Um, and I think the whole market has gone from the outsourcing to the near sourcing to the insourcing and all the way back again. It's,
Yeah, yeah. So it's less work to do. There's also just a lot of benefits to using the vendor setup because you can install the new one over the top of the old one and maintain your customizations and settings and everything instead of having to basically fight the customization of each repackaged application to try to retain it all.
yeah, and there's no question around support, right? That was always the first
Hmm.
issue. As soon
Right.
as you do anything in the repackaging world, you have to be really careful not to do too much, and your whole support mechanism, whether that was a practical problem or not, was a business issue. And this is our point about application owners, right? I think I would come back to your point that everyone scares from this term. I think the first base is to get a universally accepted term of what that means.
Hmm.
And there's a bunch of roles and responsibilities for each of those. As you said, there's I think 4 levels. That I agree with you. Is a great standard. Um, but also, what should be tied to that is it's not a scary thing. It's a good thing for the business. If we again think about packaging, repackaging, right? In the classic world, whenever you had a candidate package to bring into Windows 11, let's say, or Windows 10, that's what, or Windows 7, or we had the same problem with XP and NT. You'll remember from the days, right? Uh, I've skipped Vista and all the other ones on purpose. Um, if you didn't have some clear responsibility for a piece of software, and this can go from a widely used package, it's actually conceptually simple, like Acrobat, to a business critical app like Oracle Client, which the business probably won't work without. If you didn't have a clear responsibility of the knowledge of how that works, then you very quickly become unstuck. You might become unstuck at the repackaging phase because you don't frankly know what to do. You might get unstuck at the testing phase because if there's a problem, what do you do? Who do you call,
Hmm.
right? And you might also get, and you might get all three. You get a deployment phase issue because there might be some nuances about the deployment of that app. Once you've got through those three gates, good, great, it's out there in the world. But there's still problems potentially. So who do you go to?
Yeah.
And when I worked for various large enterprises migrating operating systems, and this was part of a point project, right? So whether they were migrating to XP or Windows 7 or Windows 10, put aside business as usual for 1 second because there's a bunch of different challenges there, as you know. I think BAU. Um, with point projects, which everyone's doing at the moment, right? I mean, I think the Windows 10 estate is for enterprises it's still like 60%. I think the last numbers I looked at.
Hmm.
I think Windows 11 is about 30. There's a overlap in there of 10% doing we don't quite know, but
Yeah.
there's still a lot of work to do. Um, it's the bottom line. But I think the application owner is crucial. I think having just that go-to person, and
Yeah.
if we didn't have that in any of those three gates, and the fourth gate being a deployment issue, then the software would very quickly cause business issues. And whenever we talk about any of these topics, I always try and go back to what's the business issue that's going to be a consequence of this malpractice, whatever that malpractice is. That malpractice may well be just blindly wrapping. It might be blindly repackaging. It might be blindly deploying with no further thought. It might be blindly patching, right? Well, that's a big
Yeah.
issue. But
In a lot of cases, the application owner is more operator of the software than a technical
yeah,
person, but they will get asked frequently to decide what customization should we do,
mm,
which I think is a rabbit hole, right? Because if you go and say, "Hey, what customizations do you want?" they're gonna produce an answer.
yeah, of course, yeah,
Uh, do you need those customizations? Are they smart
right,
things to be doing? Maybe not. And now you've signed up for a
yeah,
bunch of customization work on all your packages. But even if it's not a technical role, like they don't know the command line or do any packaging,
mm,
then they're asked, well, what should we test?
yeah,
Um, Either asked to do the testing or asked for guidance on what to test. So it does assume, whereas like an application monitor, you don't necessarily have to know a thing about the application to be
no,
an application monitor because you're gonna go see if there's a new version, read the
right,
release notes, say, yeah, there's no security stuff in here. There's
yeah,
no cool new functionality in here. Let's skip it.
yeah,
That doesn't take much expertise, but then
no, no,
you can go all the way to the other end where you really expecting them to know everything and be attending events and driving the roadmap of the product and everything else. So, like for in-house applications, right? That's
I was just
heavy.
about to mention in-house because again, it's never been a large percentage of the app estate. Right? It does depend who you talk to and what company you talk to, because
Yeah,
oil and gas companies and pharmaceuticals tend to have more, in my experience, by their very nature, right? Um, and they're actually easier. They will tend to they'll tend to kind of have people with too much knowledge of of the application.
yeah,
And what will come of that? So you'll have no problem finding an application owner, probably not using your kind of categorization, probably even an administrator, right? Application administrator level. But
yeah,
what you might find then is the danger of them having too vested an interest in this given piece of software that they're
yeah.
never going to let it go.
And then it becomes their job, right? And I think that's another big thing with application owners. For a lot of people, it's a task
Yeah,
that they
it's an admin.
attend to once in a while, and it's not really their job.
Yeah.
And so that makes it very easy to forget and just not do it or
Well, they'll
let
do
it
it all in
slide or
words.
ignore
They'll do it with
requests.
their thoughts, right? It's like if you create a workflow. In our world, we help clients, with workflows and create a workflow for whatever that task is. And there's a sweet spot between making it effective and making it practical. You
Mm,
know, you could make a workflow of 300 points that you've got to do. Now, technically, that's beautiful and pat on the back for making that beautifully, complete workflow, but no one's going to use it.
yeah,
They're going to go straight from 1 to 40 and then 40 to 60 and then just tick in between because they know they're doing a report on it. And you've actually made it worse than doing a 10-point workflow that was actually succinct and meaningful.
hmm,
Um, and on that point, this whole challenge around finding an application owner, whatever that category is, I think the important thing to the business is you can delegate you might even be able to dilute that task if you're going for the most basic level, like the monitor. So you
Hmm.
can dilute that responsibility.
Make it non-intimidating, right? Say, hey,
Right.
we're only asking you to do 5 minutes of work every 2 weeks.
We've all heard that before, right? It's just 5 minutes a week. I've heard that before. Suddenly you're there on a Friday afternoon, 2 hours trying to get this thing done. Um, but actually, I think the important point is that you can do all of that, but you can't delegate the responsibility for the app for the business, and that sits
Mhm.
with the IT ops or whoever has that remit.
Right,
I think you've got to be a bit careful. And again, it's that human side because these are people at the end of the day, and like we know, they're
right.
going
Yeah, that's why I'm careful to say that the application owner is suggesting an update
to, yeah,
be addressed or deferred, and it's
yeah,
a suggestion, right? Because they
completely.
they could say, I really think we should do it, but they
Mm,
don't know the backlog of other things and security
right.
challenges and things
Implications.
that are just higher priority that make it take forever.
Yeah, yeah. Because if we do that, then they're going to be more comfortable because they're thinking, oh, actually, this isn't, my head isn't on the block if I get this wrong, which is what
Mm,
most people will think.
yeah,
Um, and therefore, they're definitely going to be more willing to engage on that, which you'll get more out of them, of course.
yeah. I think that's a universal problem I hear about is just getting somebody to agree to be the application owner. So first you got to figure out who is the right person,
Mm,
and then if you think you found that person, convince them to take this responsibility. I,
yeah.
I heard there was one um, enterprise customer I was talking to that had like a 22,000 application portfolio, like totally
Wow.
out of control.
Wow.
And then they hardcore instituted this requirement that everything has to have an application owner.
Okay.
And so if it didn't have an application owner and nobody signed up for it, it was going to get removed.
Wow.
And
Even if there
in
were
a
people
year, they
using
got
it.
down to just over 2,000 applications. So a tenfold drop in
Wow.
application count just because people, I don't want to be the application owner. Forget it.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
remove
Well,
it from my system. What else is on the menu, right? Like how
mm,
many PDF readers do you need
yeah, yeah.
or browsers or
Well, this is the classic question. We've had, as you know, for decades, right? It's the whole kind of app optimization, and there's still a big need to do that. There's still a big need to. I remember I was working for it was a big international oil company, the early 2000s, migrating them to XP, 185,000 desktops, right? They were going from Windows NT to XP, and this is the timing of this will make you laugh because I had to do a demo to their team about this magical thing called VMware, right? Because we had a packaging team in the south of France. We had I kid you not, an articulated lorry turn up with about 100 PCs because I'd said every packager will need a PC for them to be their PC. With Appen, in that case, it was Appen Studio, but other packaging tools are available, right? With a packaging technology, a PC to test it, and a PC to be re-imaged when you're testing it. So that's what
yeah,
every package you need. I had 30 packages of 90 PCs, desktops, towers, two monitors, switches, two. This lorry arrived. I was like, oh my gosh, I need to have a chat with these guys. So I brought the kind of pretty senior people together. I said, I need to talk to you about probably a better way to do this, you know. And that was VMware. I showed them VMware, right? And it was like they'd seen a ghost. It was,
yeah.
I
That
mean,
was that was a huge change. I remember when I first saw it, I immediately saw that as the use case that I was excited about
yeah,
because I always had like a whole wall of PCs that just going through reimaging processes
yeah,
because
we
I
all did. I
tried
had a
one
stack
thing.
on my desk of six, just six desktops stacked and a little VGA switch back in the day, and that company, it was a 2 year project, 185,000 desktops, and they started off. You remind me because they started off with about 15,000 apps, and before we did, and it was in Excel, of course, it was in Excel, right?
Yeah.
And we had the same problem. Every app they kind of start off and mandated we can't start any work on this until we have. And it was even worse than an application owner because there was a business owner needed apparently and a
Mm.
technical owner each
Yeah.
application, and they can
Yeah.
be different people. and they often work because the business
Right.
people didn't want to be technical, and the technical people didn't want to be seen as business people, right?
Yeah.
And we
We've
rationalize
been
that now.
hearing that a lot, actually, that there's a need for either two different roles or a
Mm,
primary and a backup.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And people leaving the organization or changing roles, and then they're no longer the appropriate person.
yeah,
It's just such a common thing to run into,
yeah,
that when you need an answer to a question and what you step into is a person search, like it
yeah. And
just
what we did
slows
actually
everything
did
down.
we did a 6 month review of that. It was literally in a database, and we wrote a little script back in the old days of just every 6 months it emailed these said people with a
Mm.
list of apps they were on the cosh for, basically,
Yeah,
and saying, are you still on the cosh for this, right?
yeah,
And obviously, if it bounced back, then they weren't. Very simple, very simple, but it did the job of exactly what you're saying there.
yeah.
And it avoided the need for the triage and the emergency when you were having to repackage something for some important business criticality, and when time was of the essence, you made sure you
Mm.
had all the people you needed. And that is back to that point. I think that's what we're talking about, isn't it? I think the technology's there these days. There's lots of options in the technology. You know, there's the classic cloud and on-prem. There's what deployment do you use? What's your thoughts around wrapping an application? What's your thoughts around command line? That's all great. Um, but actually, who owns responsibility of this app and these apps? Because if you don't have that, then nothing will happen actually. And even worse, something can happen that shouldn't have done. You know,
Yeah,
deployment tools are fantastic, but they're the quickest route to chaos if you get them wrong.
yeah, yeah. That the ugly thing too, I see with so many applications to keep track of,
Mm,
and so many applications to try to maintain an
yeah,
owner for.
yeah.
It is there's managed applications and there's unmanaged applications,
Mm,
and the I think there's a spotlight on unmanaged applications more and more because of the security implication.
yeah.
And the most common thing I see is an event I did recently. The consensus was if it's on less than 10 machines, then they're
Mm.
not going to package it and keep track of it. They'll just react to any vulnerability scans or whatever come up.
But they're still going to allow
Reactively.
it. They still allow it in the business. They're just not interested in doing anything with it.
Yeah, they're just not managing it because so many people, there's lockdown environments where it's more under control,
Yeah.
but it's not unusual for people to have the ability or to request the ability to install an application that they
Well,
think they need, or even if they buy it and get it legitimately,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
not
yeah.
worth the effort of packaging it and managing it if it's only for a handful of systems.
In
So what
some
you
kind
end
of
up with is this huge number of applications that aren't managed, and at least if you had an application owner assigned to those,
mm, mm.
you'd be more aware of what's going on with them when there's updates and so forth, and
Yeah,
could get it through that gate. But to bury your head in the sand and just say, okay, these 800 applications in my environment we're just gonna let it be Wild West and let them
right.
get old and out of date and insecure and deal with
Just
it
hope they
someday.
just kind of die and wither away and don't cause me any problems, right?
Yeah. Yeah, or call the guy up and say, "Hey, there's a vulnerable software on your machine.
Yeah,
Remove it or upgrade it."
yeah, yeah,
And then it just becomes a chasing people down type story.
yeah. And this is the Venn diagram of so much in our world, right? Of the kind of people, process, and technology.
Hmm.
And there's a sweet spot in the middle of how to manage that, and it'll be different for each business. Some businesses will be you know people heavy, and they might go, you know what, that's fine. Maybe 3 months every quarter we'll do a true up is the wrong word, but we'll do a review of these Wild West group of apps,
Yeah,
and that's fine to do. Others will go, no, no, we never want to even get in that position. It's not allowed. We don't touch them.
yeah. Well, and but they're not touching them because of capacity, not because they
No,
don't care about them, right? It's just we can't possibly do everything. So that's really the promise of automation is your
exactly.
existing resources, if they were automating everything that could be automated, taking advantage of those command lines and
Mm,
wrapping and automated processes then that same team could handle all of the
Yeah,
applications
yeah.
and not have to turn a blind eye to so many.
No, I
Um,
agree. I agree. And automation was one of my points as well. We obviously see more and more of it. We've got the lovely AI world creeping into everything, which seems to
mhm.
be, there's a lot it can do actually. I don't think it's going to, blow up the planet in the next couple of years or make us all jobless or, have a consciousness and all that. But I think people are very excited about the, you know, I think actually it's just a fear of the unknown as always. But I
Yeah,
think there's a
there's
lot of
huge potential. I think it's going to happen sooner than later.
yeah,
Not jobs going away, but AI
changing.
playing a
It's
more
changing.
significant role.
It's changing. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's going to help massively in our world because as we know, everyone is being asked to do more with less, right? That's just the way businesses run. Okay,
Hmm.
um, and people are having to be forced into working smarter, not harder. A really
Right.
cliche phrase, but this is a brilliant way to do that. Again, if we think back 25 or 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we were repackaging, right,
Mhm.
manually. Those who've been in this world a while will remember ICE and ACE validations, right? The bane of
Yeah.
our lives. And, it
Yeah.
was a black art, right? It was a
What a
real black
waste of time.
Jeez. I mean, how much I've spent weeks of my life back in the day with those things, and it's like whack a mole, right? And I
Those
must,
ICE rules were so frustrating because it's like, here you just run this and then you can see if your package is good and you run it against what you just got from Microsoft and there's hundreds of errors.
thousands. So I used to do the training course on this stuff, right? And, the software will remain nameless, but it was from Microsoft. And I taught like a morning of doing validation errors, how to deal with them. Because as you know, and as people will know, it's this this error will flag up here, but the problem's over here, right? Well, no, I'll never forget to the day I died, ICE 33. You'll remember that, right? Com registration. This is where the problem is, actually, but the error's here. So you just know that or you don't, right?
Yeah.
So teaching people that. And I try and teach them that just because there are ICE errors and ACE errors, right? So ACEs are in between applications for those who haven't seen it. ICE are internal to a package. Just because you've got these errors doesn't mean you've got to do something about them, right? You've got to think about what is the impact to the desktop? What is the impact to the
Yeah.
business? I always try and but that's just like, that's completely alien to people. And
More more and more I think people caught on to the idea that, this proactive addressing everything possible angle just doesn't pay off. So that
right,
the ICE errors, 80% of them are absolutely harmless and don't matter at
yeah,
all. A handful of them need your attention, but you'll
right,
find that very quickly
yeah.
without looking at the ICE
Yeah,
result.
that problem will let itself be known far more quickly than you will try and validate this package. Just get
Yeah.
it out there, do a beta test. You'll know in about 10 minutes usually. And
And then Windows compatibility testing was the next
right,
one.
so
Everybody compatibility test everything, and
yeah,
then you'd find errors and you'd correct the errors ahead of time, and then eventually, you know what? There's almost never a problem, so
right, yeah,
let's
yeah,
not check for errors. Let's just
right,
see if it works and save
yeah,
a ton of
yeah.
work.
And it's fun, right? And I think AI is the latest incarnation of a great technology is going to help us. We
Hmm.
could pick the history books of many, side by side DLL versioning, right? Another one,
Yeah,
DLL isolation to avoid this DLL hell that we all used to have. And then it was the world of let's isolate everything. It's like let's isolate all the kids in the school ground and none of the kids can fight, right?
yeah, yeah,
That's the analogy. And then it became less of a problem because we were sandboxing everything and actually then realized people, as you say, realized it didn't really matter. Um, but I think on that topic of automation and AI, there's a lot it's going to do and is already doing in
hmm
obviously different worlds compared to our world. But anything where there's a lot of data to manage and to find trends in, that's the sweet spot. I think we'll see more and more of that. And
yeah. It definitely is. At Juriba, I'm already using AI for command line suggestions
mm,
and now to automate repackaging.
right,
So obviously you can use a silent command line to repackage an application,
uh,
but if you don't have a command line that's doing what you want,
yeah,
then AI can click next, next, next in the installation wizard very effectively.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because that's all you're doing fundamentally, right?
Yeah. So the number of applications, you can do more with automation
Totally.
for sure, but not everything can be automated. So I think sometimes people feel threatened, like you say, with AI taking over, taking your job. Automation could take over your job.
Right.
What if you could repackage every application? Um, the good news is you can't. Not for the foreseeable future will you be able to
No,
repackage
no.
every application successfully. So there's still a need for experts to get their hands dirty and
Yeah.
solve the tough problems. There's just less of them. And there's
Yeah.
no need for a packaging expert to be wasting their time on an application that could be quickly automated. There's plenty of difficult ones to focus on rather than being a bottleneck to 100% coverage or a bottleneck to, you know, meeting your SLAs for vulnerability updates and so forth.
And I think that role has broadened, right? So, you know, terms like EUCs, end user computing, right? And managers of digital workspaces,
Mm-hmm.
right? Same thing. They're the roles now that are forming in businesses. It's a broader umbrella because it does cover all the classics in the world of application repackaging and management and update and patch strategy and OS migration and all that. But it also covers what used to be quite a clear delineation between that world and the deployment world.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's an old IBM advert years ago. You'll probably certainly here in the UK. It's basically around oh, it's a software problem. Oh no, they go to the software guys, and the software guys, oh, it's a hardware problem, right? And
Yeah.
we had that. We had that. Oh, it's a repackaging issue. No, it's a deployment issue. Right? And there was two. But now I think the great thing is through automation, through the harmonization of technologies and the need to do more with less and smarter, not harder, and all of the above.
Mm-hmm.
That is now a broader responsibility. There might be distinct capabilities in there, different people, of course, but the responsibility is broader. You are serving the business. You've got to serve the business, whatever that business is, to maintain its readiness to do whatever its business is. And to do that, you've got to maintain this app estate. And that's
Yeah.
the end users. And it doesn't matter what machine they're using, right? I think the other thing is the the whole BYOD kind of thing. I've kind of seen, obviously, last several years or 10 years probably now. But to your point about people saying, "Oh, George is an admin, so because he uses this quirky little finance software that costs £3,000 a month and nobody else needs it, so we've given George admin rights."
Mm-hmm.
Next thing you know, George has got the WannaCry virus because he hasn't updated anything or he's installed stuff he shouldn't be, doesn't understand actually. Because
Yeah.
most of the time, my other kind of world about cybersecurity and that is that most threats are from within, right? 80%. Most of those are not malicious. It's not like in the films when the guys are in the van down the road with the satellite dish and trying to hack you. Of course they exist, of course they do, but it's not that. It's a lot of the time in the enterprise world, it's someone's been given the wrong credibility and credential to do something that they don't know can cause harm but does cause harm.
Yeah. And it comes down to prioritization because
Yeah,
they've got a lot to do
well,
and enterprise has a lot of software. So which ones do you deal with? Like
you can't do everything right.
the the other the other thing I see is one, you get a good security report,
Yeah,
not just for your managed apps, but for all your apps.
yeah,
And there's just a mountain of updates that you have to do, and you can't
yeah,
possibly get to them.
yeah.
So you start prioritizing, and then you realize, oh, a lot of this software is end of life.
Mm,
How do you prioritize the end of life software? At least the vulnerable software, you've got a criticality rating or a CVSS score,
yeah,
something that you can sort them by to say, these have exploits, these don't. I can
yeah.
group these.
You can do like
But
a
when it's
Amber
end of
Green.
life, what are you going to do, right? It's there are no vulnerabilities being disclosed against it because
No,
it's not being monitored anymore. So arguably, it could be the most vulnerable exploitable software in your
right,
environment.
exactly. I mean, you can't presume that just because there's nothing come up, it's all good, right?
But when you're buried under such an avalanche of requests and
Yeah,
needs that you can't keep up with,
yeah,
that's exactly the type of thing that's just easy to defer. Like we just
yeah,
can't deal with that.
yeah. And I think that takes us full circle, right? If there was an application owner, then that visibility at least, or that flag of, oh, this has come out of end of this has come out of support, or it's
Exactly.
come out of life.
Right.
You've almost got a preemptive opportunity to put that to one side and perhaps schedule a review of that, or maybe maybe you say, oh, once we've got to 10 of these, we'll do a little mini project to just work out what's really going on.
Right. There's still a need to prioritize, but
Yeah,
just
of
with
course.
with the right information, you can prioritize effectively,
Yeah,
and with the right automation, you can do more. Than,
yeah,
but there's still going to be a bottleneck somewhere, whether it's in deployment testing or probably deployment testing, right? Because that's
yeah.
another thing where UAT is time consuming. You got to find somebody to do it, and there might not be a problem.
Mm.
Maybe you shouldn't waste your time. Like, get that package, deploy it to your pilot user, or
Yeah.
your application owner, or a small group of people,
Mm.
and see if it's okay.
Well,
Because if
that's
it
what
is,
we
you just saved yourself a bunch of time. If it's not, you've got your team to focus just on those.
yeah, we used to do that, and people still do that. That in whatever application cataloging system you use, right? Because there are many ways of doing it, um, and however you structure it, right? Whether it's based on the vendor of the software, whether it's based on the business unit, the cost center, the office, the hierarchy of the businesses, you can cut this 1,000 ways.
Hmm.
There's always been a very good best practice of having a quarantined group, and so
Yeah,
that's where the bad guys go into, that you're kind of unknown, and then you release those to a beta group, in the old days of Active Directory, which is still there under a different name. Um, you'd create a little organizational unit just for these guys and deploy it out, and then just get people to use it for a few days. And
yeah,
again, all these things, like we were saying earlier about the validations, the problems soon bubble up to the surface,
yeah,
actually. And they're usually the same kind of problems, and that's just the experience thing. And that means once you capture that, you can then turn that into an automation, right? And then that becomes better for the future, and it's all cyclic and self-improving, and then
yeah, yeah. It's
adding
just an
AI.
iterative process of reacting, and
Yeah,
and hopefully one day you're not putting out fires, but you're actually preventing them.
yeah, exactly. It's like the smoke detectors in the house, right?
Hmm.
Smoke alarms. That's the analogy I always used, rather than going around the house and installing sprinklers, right, which is very expensive, very destructive, very hard to test. Now, how do you test a sprinkler without turning it on, right? um, And then the other level is you can put fire extinguishers, right? Okay, you've got to go around these things. Are expensive. You've got to be serviced. You've got to check they've all got a good pressure. Well, surely putting a little smoke alarm that give you a bit of a heads up is a much better idea. You know,
Yeah,
that's the
unless
analogy.
they're all chirping because they need battery
Well,
changes,
there is
and
that point.
nobody nobody's doing it. You just
That's,
live
that's,
with
a
it.
global problem. That's a global problem. Well, they're giving you a heartbeat, right? They're telling you they're still alive, so that's good, huh?
Yeah.
Why would you
Yeah,
worry
but
when?
the enterprise software analogy, you've got thousands of chirping
Yeah, you need a
not
like a,
being attended to
you need a chirp,
detectors.
chirp manager, right? A chirp owner. Um, but yeah, that concept of just get it out there and test it in a controlled manner.
Yeah.
And importantly, like we say, I think feeding that back into the business, whatever that outcome is, good and bad,
Hmm.
just helps the whole thing improve.
And every application can be handled differently as well. So there's
Mm-hmm.
some applications, if possible, if they install in the user context, if the permissions allow it, turning automatic updates on
Mm-hmm.
can be an option for certain
Yeah,
applications. For certain applications, maybe install it from the Windows Store and let the automatic updates run from there. But
or a local store, like an enterprise store, local store. Yeah.
yeah, or a local store, enterprise store. I'm hearing that as more and more of an enterprise approach, which is a
Mm-hmm.
little surprising because it's the opposite end of repackage everything and test everything.
Mm-hmm.
The command line's kind of the next more agile way to get
Yeah,
something out effectively
yeah,
and maintain it effectively. But there are different options. So you could command line, you could wrap it, you could win get it, you could
yeah.
there's so many different options, and I think a lot of people get hung up on this is the way we want to do everything.
Right.
We're going to repackage everything. We're going to command line everything. Now,
Totally.
you can't do 100% of everything the same
And you
way,
don't
and
need to.
it's not appropriate to.
No, no, exactly. And when you ask them why, you will sometimes get that classic answer, well, because that's what we've always done, right?
Right.
And they
Yeah.
go, well, okay, and in all kinds of walks of life, you get that challenge, right? But that's great, but that doesn't
Yeah.
mean you need to do that moving forward, right?
Yeah. I was trying to talk a client out of repackaging
Yeah,
everything. Like sometimes you should repackage, but
mm,
most of the time you don't need to.
yeah,
And they just couldn't wrap their head around it because MSI has logging, it
mm,
has repair, it has rollback,
mm,
and those things are just awesome. And I'm like,
mm,
okay, well, they're only they shouldn't be uh, things that you experience very often. I know if I have a package and it's repairing, I
that's not
see
good.
that as a problem with the
Not
package
good.
that I should have fixed that.
Yeah, yeah, that's not good.
And if it's rolling back, then
Even
that
worse.
means my package doesn't work at all, and I should have found that out, very
Oh,
early on, not in
yeah,
production.
yeah,
So the number of instances by which you would need those benefits of MSI
it's a really good
should
point.
be such a rare edge case
Yeah,
that there's no way it's worth the effort of repackaging
no,
and testing everything for that
yeah,
tiny benefit. But like you say, if that's the way it's always been done, it's hard to reconsider and change.
yeah. I think is that there's that fear of change as always going in, um, and also there are rightly right. There's a kind of protection of people's livelihoods, right, and jobs. Okay,
Yeah,
without being rude, I mean these guys. If you're a company, XYZ Corp, and you've engaged, keep it generic, but ABC company, right, to package your software, and if you come in and say to ABC company, oh, we're not going to package anymore,
right.
right? It's got to have this massive directive to do and do a repackage. That's their business dying gone, right? So there's then their interest to keep packaging, right? Keep billing, right? Keep packaging.
Yeah.
It's great. It takes 4 days. I
I,
think businesses are waking up to that actually.
yeah, there's definitely different ways to look at it, and an alarmist approach is not crazy, because that is threatening. That just the way automation is threatening. But if you think about, well, what if I consider 100% of the portfolio?
Yeah,
There's still plenty of work to do. We could just
yeah. It's just
cover more.
different work.
Yeah, it's different work. Like I'd only have to focus on the difficult, challenging, and quote unquote fun packages, right? Because I, I don't want to do Chrome anymore. I'm tired of
Right.
Chrome.
Done with Chrome. Done with Acrobat. I don't want to see Oracle again.
Yes.
Not picking on any of those, by the way. Yeah, and give me the juicy ones. Give me the juicy ones to test my knowledge and give me that feeling of success
Yeah.
and also give me the ones that are business critical as well,
Right.
because that's
And
the
then even
biggest.
the ones that can be automated aren't all gonna come out just the way you want either. So there's still going to be some touching
Yeah,
required, but just a lot more could be done by those packaging teams to cover just the tough stuff.
but I
And
think
that's
that
kind of the approach with app owner and app readiness, where the story we're trying to promote is those app owners can initiate the repackaging themselves if it's automated. It's just a matter of kicking it off.
yeah,
And if it doesn't pass tests, automated tests,
mm,
then the packagers pick it up. If it does, if it succeeds and pass the test, then you can go straight to a pilot and get it out way, way faster. But in the end, I really think that boils down to being able to cover 100% of the applications and not
mm,
ignoring, an increasingly large percentage because you don't have the capacity.
yeah. I think once you get to that, they'll see it serving the business well, and in fact, they'll be serving the business better because
Hmm.
the why you call the time to desktop, right? TTD, from the initial request through to being active on people's desks will be reduced by
Yeah,
the use of that automation, by the use of that AI, by that smarter, not harder approach. Um, and fundamentally, that's the goal, right? Get these apps out to the business and help the business do what it does.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
The resources are already tight, so it's not like we can lower the resources with automation
Well, you
Maybe you can, but that kind of assumes that you're not going to do more, and there's so much more to
I'm going to
do.
say, I mean, actually, that's the kind of that's the classroom answer to why you want to automate and use AI, right? Oh, we can do more with less people. Well, no, actually, the better answer and the correct answer is you can do better things and you can do more things
Right.
because you always got more things to do. There's always
Right.
more stuff coming in, different
Yeah.
challenges.
Once you appreciate that there is definitely a bottleneck,
Yeah,
then releasing that bottleneck just means that you're flowing the way you need to,
right.
not that you're no longer needed.
And,
Yeah.
and I've never, for the record, you're probably the same. I've never seen a business without a bottleneck in that area,
Yeah.
ever,
Exactly.
ever, ever,
Yeah.
ever.
And if there isn't a bottleneck,
You don't, you,
then
well,
I can almost guarantee it's because they're ignoring so much work
right.
that they should be doing.
Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the black hole in the telescope. I can't see the black hole. It's all okay. Okay, no problem. Don't worry about the fact there's no energy there or there's no light, whatever. But I can't see it, so I'm good. All right. Good luck with that.
Cool. All right. Well, Crispin, it was great catching up with you. I
Okay.
appreciate the time. I always love these topics, and getting to sit with you with so many years of experience in the same space is a pleasure.
Right back at you. It's been good, and let's do another one. And see you guys soon.
Cool. Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you for listening to this latest episode of the App Management Experts podcast. To hear more, subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or at Juriba.com. I also encourage you to follow Juriba on LinkedIn to keep up with other recordings and articles we're publishing. See you next time.